I always helped my parents, but when I was in the hospital, they refused to watch my kids because of a concert. If you had asked me 5 years ago where I saw myself at 35, I would have painted you a picture of stability. A comfortable house in Seattle, a loving wife, a career in programming that kept me well paid but never overworked. Maybe a couple of kids, weekends at the park, a dog in the backyard, BBQs with the neighbors. Nothing extravagant. Just the kind of life where you didn't have to think too hard about the future because everything was on track. That's what I thought I had, until I didn't. 3 years ago, my wife, Amber, left me. Not just left, she hit the eject button on our entire life and took the emergency cash with her. I woke up one day and she was gone. All of it. Our savings, her clothes, even the good coffee maker, what she didn't take. Our 3-year-old twins, Lucas and Macy. No custody battle, no back and forth. Just a text message saying she wasn't cut out for this life, and a bank account reading 0. I don't think I slept for the first 6 months. Working remotely as a software engineer paid the bills, but try to write clean code on 2 hours of sleep while managing twin toddlers? That was a nightmare even my worst debugging sessions hadn't prepared me for. The diapers, the feedings, the tantrums. It was like trying to run an IT help desk for tiny, illogical creatures who spoke a language I didn't understand and had no concept of patience. At first, I thought Amber might change her mind. Maybe she'd realize the kids needed her. Maybe she'd feel some kind of guilt. But as the months passed, it became clear she wasn't coming back, and she wasn't sending a dime. I hired a lawyer, but tracking her down was like trying to find a lost sock in a laundromat. I kept getting bills for things I didn't even remember signing up for, and every time I looked at my finances, it felt like my bank account was playing a game of limbo. How low can we go? That's when Kara came in. I found her through a local nanny agency, and hiring her was probably the smartest thing I've done in the last 3 years. She was young, efficient, and had the patience of a saint. Unlike me, she actually seemed to enjoy dealing with screaming toddlers, and the kids adored her. She kept things running smoothly so I could work, and over time, she became more than just an employee. She was the only adult in my life I could count on. Not that I was completely alone. My parents were still around, though their idea of support mostly involved reminding me how tough they had it when I was growing up. They lived a few hours away and were always struggling with money, which meant I was constantly sending them checks to help cover their mortgage, utilities, car repairs, whatever emergency had popped up that month. My dad still drove the same pickup truck from the early 90s, and my mom kept asking me how to turn off the Wi-Fi whenever the internet was down. Despite everything, I had fallen into a routine. It wasn't easy, but it was predictable. Work, kids, sleep when I could. Repeat. My life had shrunk into a series of scheduled blocks. Morning tantrums, virtual meetings, nap time hustle, dinner disasters, bedtime chaos. No surprises, no risks, no change. Then there were the weekends. Instead of date nights or hanging out with friends, I spent Saturdays at the grocery store, where I'd end up overanalyzing things like which brand of mac and cheese tasted most like actual cheese. Sundays meant laundry day, which had become more like a scavenger hunt to find out where my kids had stashed their socks this time. I wasn't unhappy, but I wasn't exactly living my best life either. It felt like I was just getting through each day, one coffee and meltdown at a time. I had accepted that this was my life now, until one day, everything changed. Waking up that morning, something felt off. Not in the forgot to pay the electric bill kind of way, but in the why does it feel like a fork is stabbing me in the stomach kind of way. I rolled onto my side, hoping the pain would magically disappear, but instead, it spread, twisting like someone was wringing my insides like a wet towel. I checked the time, 5:47 a.m. The kids weren't up yet, and I should have gone back to sleep, but there was no chance of that. I dragged myself to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and stared at my reflection. I looked like a guy who had spent the night wrestling a raccoon in a dumpster behind a 7-Eleven. Maybe it was just something I ate? The leftover Chinese takeout from 2 nights ago hadn't exactly been fresh, but I'd had worse. I popped a couple of antacids, muttered a prayer to the god of bad food decisions, and convinced myself it was fine. No time to deal with it anyway. Kara had taken a short trip to visit her family, which meant I was on full-time dad duty for the next few days. There was no backup plan, no passing the baton. It was just me and 2 toddlers who had the combined energy of a dozen caffeinated squirrels. By the time Lucas and Macy woke up, the pain had dulled to a nagging throb. Manageable. I powered through breakfast, wrangled them into their clothes, and set them up with cartoons while I attempted to work. Of course. Work mostly involved staring at my screen, trying to focus on lines of code while my stomach felt like it was auditioning for a horror movie. At first, I blamed the usual suspects: stress, lack of sleep, maybe a bad coffee-to-water ratio. But by noon, it was clear that this wasn't going away. It wasn't just discomfort anymore. It was sharp, unrelenting, and spreading. I tried calling Kara just to get a second opinion, but she didn't pick up. Not that she could do much from another state, but I figured maybe she'd tell me I was overreacting. Instead, I got her voicemail and a reality check. I was alone in this. I took a deep breath and did what any rational, responsible adult would do. I ignored it. I had emails to answer, meetings to sit through, lunch to make. The kids needed me to function. But halfway through making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, the pain escalated from annoying to someone just stuck a hot knife into my side. I gripped the counter, breathing through my teeth, trying not to panic. Macy was sitting on the floor, singing some made-up song about a dancing banana, and Lucas was attempting to shove an entire sandwich into his mouth at once. They had no idea that their dad was barely staying upright. This wasn't normal. I grabbed my phone, fingers shaking, and Googled my symptoms. Bad idea. Within 5 minutes, I had convinced myself I was either having a heart attack, dying of some rare disease, or about to explode like a defective airbag. No way around it. I needed to go to the hospital, but that meant figuring out what to do with the kids. My parents were too far away to help, and my neighbors were mostly young professionals who barely knew my name. I considered calling Kara again, but even if she answered, she was hours away, which left exactly one option. I had to take the kids with me. I grabbed their coats, packed a bag with snacks, and mentally prepared for what was bound to be an absolute circus. Lucas and Macy were thrilled, thinking we were going on some grand adventure. Meanwhile, I was just hoping I didn't pass out before we got there. By the time I buckled them into their car seats and started driving, the pain was blurring my vision. The hospital wasn't far, but every red light felt like a personal attack. I kept checking the rear-view mirror, trying to act normal, while my inside staged a full-scale revolt. Lucas kicked the back of my seat. "Where we going?" I forced a smile. "Just a quick stop, bud." Macy clapped her hands. "Can we get ice cream after?" I let out a short laugh, immediately regretting it as another wave of pain hit. "We'll see." Then Lucas, ever the skeptic, narrowed his eyes. "You okay, Daddy?" I nodded, gripping the wheel tighter. "Of course." Which was a total lie. I focused on the road, pushing down the creeping panic. This was supposed to be a quick checkup. Nothing serious. Just in and out. At least, that's what I told myself. But deep down, I knew things were about to get a lot worse. The hospital waiting room was a disaster. Lucas and Macy had already torn to their snack bag like a pack of wild raccoons, and now they were engaged in what could only be described as a high-stakes game of who could make Dad lose his mind first. Macy had climbed onto the plastic chair next to me, pretending to be a cat, while Lucas was attempting to see how far he could push a rolling stool before someone stopped him. Meanwhile, my stomach felt like it was actively trying to stage a prison break. The receptionist handed me a clipboard full of paperwork, which felt like a cruel joke at this point. I could barely sit upright, let alone fill out a form that asked for the exact date of my last tetanus shot. I scribbled down what I could, hoping they wouldn't reject me for bad handwriting, and handed it back. An eternity later, realistically, probably 20 minutes, I was finally called back. The nurse took one look at me hunched over and ushered me into an exam room. So fast it felt like I had skipped a line at Disney World. Vitals, blood work, the usual. I tried to explain my symptoms between grimaces, but honestly, at this point, I was more focused on not collapsing in front of my kids. They watched with wide eyes, fascinated by every beat and monitor like we were on some weird field trip. Then the doctor came in. Older guy, serious face. No small talk. He glanced at my chart, prodded my stomach a few times, and gave me a look that sent my anxiety into overdrive. A few tests later, the verdict came in. Appendicitis. But not just your average run-of-the-mill, we caught it early kind. Nope. Mine had decided to go full chaos mode. It was inflamed, on the verge of rupturing, and needed to come out immediately. I blinked at him, trying to process the words through the haze of pain and sheer exhaustion. Surgery? Now, that wasn't part of the plan. There was a long pause before reality hit me, like a truck. The kids. Who was going to take care of them? My brain scrambled for options. Kara was out of town. My best friend from college had moved across the country years ago. And my neighbors? Yeah, I wasn't exactly on, hey, can you watch my toddlers while I get emergency surgery? Terms with them. I had one last card to play my sister, Melissa. She was reliable, responsible, and lived 3 states away. I reached my phone, praying she'd answer. Straight to voicemail. Of course. I groaned, gripping the hospital bed rail as another wave of pain hit. The doctor was already talking about pre-op procedures, but I barely heard him. My brain was still stuck on the fact that I was about to be unconscious on an operating table, while my 3-year-olds ran wild in a hospital. There was only one other option, one I really didn't want to consider. My parents. I hadn't called them for anything serious in years. Our relationship wasn't bad, exactly, but it wasn't great either. They were the kind of parents who reminded you how much they struggled when they were younger every time you asked for help. The kind who acted like giving you life advice counted as actual assistance. But right now, I didn't have a choice. With shaking hands, I pulled up my dad's number and hit call. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then he picked up. His voice was groggy, like I had woken him up from a deep nap. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. Hey, Dad, I need a favor. A long pause on the other end. How big a favor? I exhaled, pressing my fingers against my forehead. Emergency room big. Surgery big. I need you to watch the kids. Another pause. Longer this time. My stomach twisted. Not just from the pain, but from the waiting. The line was quiet for a second too long. Not the kind of pause where someone's processing a lot of information. More like the kind where they're trying to find the least awful way to say something you're not going to like. Then my dad sighed. A long, tired sigh that instantly made my stomach twist in a way that had nothing to do with the impending surgery. Look, son, he started. And I already knew this wasn't going anywhere good. Your mom and we've got plans tonight. We're heading out of town for a few days. I blinked at the ceiling, gripping the hospital bed's railing. You're what? We're driving down to Portland. Got tickets to see that Eagles tribute band your mom likes. Non-refundable. Hotels booked, you know how it is. I waited for the part where he laughed and said he was joking. It didn't come. I felt my jaw clench. Dad, I'm about to go into surgery. I have no one else to watch the kids. I wouldn't be calling if this wasn't serious. There was a muffled sound, my mom's voice in the background, probably asking what was going on. Then my dad exhaled again. Brian, you're their father. You wanted kids. You got to learn how to handle them. Life doesn't stop just because things get inconvenient. I could feel my heartbeat thudding in my ears. Handling them isn't the problem. The problem is that I'm literally about to be unconscious on an operating table. Who exactly is supposed to keep a 3-year-old from climbing the hospital walls while I'm getting my insides rearranged? There was another pause. Then my mom's voice came through, louder now, like my dad had put me on speaker. Honey, we told you from the start that Amber wasn't right for you. We warned you. And now look where you are. My fingers tightened around my phone. I didn't call for an I told you so, Mom. I called because I need help. Just this once. Just this once. My dad let out a short laugh, the kind that didn't have any actual humor in it. Brian, do you have any idea how much we've already done for you? You act like we owe you something. We raised you. We paid for your college when you needed help. We've done our part. We're retired now. It's our time. I stared at the ceiling, willing myself to stay calm. I never asked you to pay for my college. I took out loans. I worked through school. You helped, yeah, but I paid you back. I send you money every month. I've helped with your mortgage, your car repairs, even that AC unit you replaced last summer. And now, the one time I need something, my mom cut me off. That was your choice. You offered. My throat tightened. Yeah, because every time I got a phone call about how hard things were for you, how tight money was, how I was the only one you could count on. Silence. That was it, wasn't it? I'd spent my whole adult life bending over backward to make sure they were okay. But when it was me asking for something, they had a concert to get to, my dad cleared his throat. Look, you'll figure it out. You always do. You're a smart guy. And besides, you're the one who decided to have kids. We raised ours already. It's not our job anymore. It took me a second to realize my fingers were trembling around the phone. The pain in my stomach wasn't even the worst thing I was feeling anymore. Got it. I said finally, voice flat, enjoy the concert. And I hung up. For a second, I just sat there, staring at the wall, feeling something cold settle in my chest. The kind of realization you don't come back from. I wasn't their son. Not really. I was just their emergency fund. And I had just run out of withdrawals. The hospital room suddenly felt smaller. The fluorescent lights too bright. The air too thin. Lucas and Macy were still busy entertaining themselves in the corner, oblivious of the fact that their dad was currently having the most depressing epiphany of his life. I exhaled slowly, pressing a hand to my forehead. All right, no time to dwell. This wasn't new information. I had just refused to acknowledge it before. But now I had to focus. I had 2 toddlers and an appendix that was actively trying to ruin my life. No parents. No backup. Just me. I forced myself to sit up and looked over at Lucas and Macy. All right, guys. Change of plans. Looks like we're going to have to figure this out on our own. Lucas perked up. Are we spies now? Macy gasped. Secret mission? I let out a weak chuckle. Something like that. My phone buzzed in my hand, snapping me back to reality. I glanced down, expecting another useless notification, but froze when I saw the name on the screen. Melissa, my sister. I hesitated for half a second before answering. Mel, Brian, got your message. What the hell is going on? And just like that, I had one last shot at getting through this night. Melissa's voice came to the phone, crackling slightly like she was somewhere far away. Too far. My heart sank before she even spoke. Brian, listen, I just got your message. I wish I could be there, but I'm kind of out of the country right now. I squeezed my eyes shut, pinching the bridge of my nose. Where? Mexico. Tulum, actually. There was a pause. It was a last-minute trip. Of course. Melissa was always spontaneous, always chasing some new experience. Normally, I admired that about her. Right now, it felt like a cosmic joke. Look, I know this is terrible timing, she continued. But I have a friend, Michelle. She's a nanny, professional, works with a ton of families back home. She's between jobs right now and could come help. I can call her, get her over there in an hour. I hesitated, looking over at Lucas and Macy. They were now deep into some game involving an empty juice box and an abandoned hospital gown. They needed someone. I needed someone. And I was fresh out of choices. You trust her? My voice was tight, the pain in my stomach making it harder to focus. Completely. She's got references. And honestly, she's probably more qualified to handle 2 toddlers than I am. That wasn't exactly reassuring. But I didn't have time to debate. The alternative was leaving my kids in the hospital waiting room and hoping the vending machine could parent them for the next 6 hours. Fine. Call her. Melissa exhaled in relief. Okay, I'll send you her number, but she'll head straight to the hospital. Just hang tight. The call ended, and I let my phone drop onto my lap. I was really doing this. Leaving my kids with a complete stranger. A nurse came in, clipboard in hand. We're almost ready to prep you for surgery. Any family arriving soon. Yeah. The word felt hollow in my mouth. A babysitter. She smiled sympathetically. That's still something. Maybe. The nurse left, and I pulled my phone back up. There was one last thing I needed to do before they knocked me out. I tapped my banking app and scrolled to the scheduled payment section. For years, I had automatic transfers set up for my parents, covering their mortgage shortfalls, surprise expenses, the never-ending just-in-case emergencies. Thousands of dollars over time. Maybe more. I hovered over the cancel button, hesitating for only a second. Then I pressed it. One by one, the payments disappeared. A clean break. My parents were about to learn what life was like without my money. And for the first time in years, I was about to learn what life was like without the weight of their expectations. The door swung open and a woman stepped in. Mid-40s, confident, warm eyes with a slight, I've seen it all expression. She spotted the kids immediately and crouched down. You must be Lucas and Macy. I'm Michelle. We're going to have so much fun while Daddy takes a nap. Okay. Lucas looked skeptical. What kind of fun? Michelle grinned. The kind that involves snacks. Macy gasped. Like fruit snacks. I don't know, maybe. She winked, but only if we let Daddy get better first. I exhaled, tension easing just a little. Michelle might have just been a name in my sister's contacts, but right now, she was exactly what I needed. The nurse returned, adjusting my four. All right, Brian. Ready? I took one last look at my kids. Yeah, let's do this. As they wheeled me out, I caught a final glimpse of my phone screen. No more payments scheduled. For the first time in years, my bank account was mine. Now the real question was, how long until my parents noticed? And how loud would the fallout be? The first thing I registered when I woke up was a dull, aching pain in my stomach. The second was the relentless buzzing of my phone. Still groggy from the anesthesia, I blinked at the hospital ceiling, feeling that weird post-surgery fog in my brain. My fingers fumbled for my phone on the side table. When I finally managed to grab it, the screen lit up with what could only be described as a digital ambush. 34 missed calls, over a dozen texts, all from the same two people, Mom and Dad. I sighed and scrolled through the messages. Asterisk Mom. Brian, call me now. Asterisk. Dad, what the hell is going on? Mom, this better be a mistake. Asterisk Dad, you think this is funny? Cutting us off without even telling us? Asterisk. Asterisk Mom, we did everything for you. And this is how you treat us. Asterisk. Dad, answer the damn phone. Not a single message asking how the surgery went. No, are you okay? Or, how are the kids? Just pure outrage that their monthly cash flow had been shut off. I let my phone drop onto my lap and stared at the ceiling. My head was still foggy, but one thing had never been clearer. This was never about me. It never had been. A soft knock on the door pulled me out of my thoughts. Michelle peeked her head in, balancing a tray with what looked like the saddest hospital meal known to man. Hey, Sleeping Beauty. Kids are good. They demolished a bag of animal crackers and are currently convincing each other that the ceiling tiles are made of marshmallows. I chuckled, then winced. Sounds about right. She set the tray down and gave me a look. You okay? You look like you just read some really bad news. I tapped my phone. Parents finally noticed I stopped paying their bills. They are not taking it well. Michelle snorted. Shocking. And here I thought they'd send you a fruit basket as a thank you for the years of free money. I shook my head, but I wasn't laughing. They don't even care that I just had surgery. It's all about the money. Before Michelle could respond, my phone buzzed again. Melissa. I hesitated, then answered. Hey. Brian, what is going on? Her voice was sharp, urgent. Mom and Dad are freaking out. They're saying you just abandoned them. Cut them off completely. What happened? I exhaled. Did they mention I was in the hospital? Or that I had emergency surgery? A pause. Wait, what? No. They just said you turned on them and left them with nothing. I let out a dry laugh. Figures. Melissa was silent for a second. Okay, start from the beginning. because right now none of this makes sense. So I told her everything, how I had called them desperate from the hospital, how they refused to help because they had concert tickets, how they told me I should have handled it on my own, how I realized in that moment that I had spent years being their personal ATM while they didn't even consider stepping up for me once. Melissa didn't respond immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was uncertain. "Brian, are you sure you didn't misunderstand them? You know how they are. Maybe they thought you weren't serious." I closed my eyes, my grip tightening on the phone. "Melissa, I was in the ER, about to be wheeled into surgery, with no one to watch my kids. I wasn't joking." She inhaled sharply. "They really refused?" "They didn't just refuse," I said. "They made it clear that they don't see helping me as their responsibility. But my money? That's apparently something they felt entitled to." More silence. Then quietly, "I don't know what to say." "Nothing to say." I muttered, "It is what it is." Melissa let out a slow breath. I need to think about this. I'll call you later." And just like that, she was gone. I set my phone down, my chest tight. Would she believe me? Or would she keep buying into the version of events that made our parents look like the victims? Either way, I knew one thing for sure. The fallout was just beginning. By the time I got home, I felt like I had been hit by a truck. The painkillers were doing their job, but moving around still felt like I had a brick lodged in my stomach. Luckily, Kara was back, and the second she walked through the door, the twins practically launched themselves at her. Michelle had been a lifesaver. But there was something about Kara's return that made everything feel a little more normal. She took one look at me shuffling around like a senior citizen and declared I was on mandatory couch rest. I didn't argue. For the first time in what felt like forever, things started to settle. I was recovering. The kids were happy. I wasn't hemorrhaging money into my parents' bank account. And most importantly, my phone had finally stopped lighting up with their angry messages. For about 3 days. Then they showed up. I was on the couch, half watching some cooking show, while Macy built a questionable-looking tower out of couch cushions. When the doorbell rang, I instinctively knew who it was before I even looked. Sure enough, through the peephole, there they were. My mom, arms crossed, looking as though she had just discovered I had committed some grave sin. My dad, standing a few feet behind her, already scowling. I debated not answering, pretending I wasn't home, but I knew that wouldn't stop them. So I opened the door. "Brian." My mom's voice was tight. "We need to talk." I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "If this is about the payments." "Of course it's about the payments." My dad snapped. "You think you can just cut us off like that? We're your parents." I sighed. "I didn't cut you off. I stopped paying for things that weren't my responsibility in the first place." My mom's eyes widened like I had just slapped her. "So that's how it is? After everything we've done for you?" I felt a sharp stab of irritation. "Everything you've done for me? Mom, when I needed you, when I was in the hospital, when I had no one to watch my kids, you refused because you had concert tickets." She waved a hand dismissively. "You're blowing that out of proportion. We thought you'd figure something out. And you didn't you?" "That's not the point," I said. "The point is, when I needed you, you weren't there. But now that you need something, suddenly it's my job to step up again." My dad scoffed. "We're your parents. You owe us that." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Oh, you? For what? Raising me? That's literally what parents are supposed to do." My mom's lip trembled. "So what? You're just leaving us to struggle? To fend for ourselves?" I ran a hand down my face. "Mom, you're not struggling. You have a house, retirement funds, Social Security. You just don't want to adjust your lifestyle. You want to keep living the way you always have, with my money filling in the gaps." She gasped, as if I had just accused her of something horrific. "You don't understand. This is about respect." "No," I said, my voice steady. "This is about boundaries, and for the first time, I'm actually setting them." They both stared at me, as if waiting for me to cave. But I wasn't going to. Not this time. "I'm not responsible for you," I continued. I have my own family to take care of, my own future to think about, and I want to apologize for finally putting myself and my kids first. My dad shook his head. Unbelievable. You'd really just let us suffer? I exhaled. No, Dad. I'm letting you be adults. A long silence stretched between us. My mom looked on the verge of tears. My dad looked like he was barely containing his anger, but I didn't waver. I had spent my whole life making myself small for them, trying to be the perfect son, the dependable one, the one who always came through. But in the end, it had never been about me. It had always been about what I could give. And I was done. They must have realized it, too, because my dad let out a frustrated huff and turned back toward the car. My mom lingered for a second longer, her eyes searching my face for some kind of weakness. But she didn't find it. Without another word, she turned and followed my dad. I watched as they pulled out of my driveway, my heart pounding. For the first time in years, I had stood my ground. The real question was, would they accept it? Or was this just the beginning? A few days after my parents' dramatic exit, I was starting to think I might finally get some peace. I was still sore from surgery, but the kids were happy. Kara had things under control, and most importantly, my phone had stopped blowing up with notifications from my parents. Then, out of nowhere, Melissa showed up at my door. I barely had time to register the knock before she was standing in my living room, arms crossed, looking equal parts confused and pissed. "All right," she said, dropping her purse on the couch. "Explain." I blinked. "Explain what?" She exhaled sharply. "Mom and Dad said you basically lost your mind and cut them off over a minor surgery, like some overgrown teenager throwing a tantrum. And, by the way, they also told me you barely ever helped them financially, so they had no choice but to rely on me for years." I froze. "Wait, what?" Melissa folded her arms tighter, eyes narrowing. "Yeah, every time I visited, they'd mention how Brian is doing well, but he's so distant, or he's got all this money but never offers to help his poor parents. They made it sound like you barely lifted a finger. So I stepped in. I've been sending them money for years. Not a ton, but enough. I figured you just weren't in a position to help." I stared at her, my brain struggling to process what I had just heard. Melissa, I had been covering their bills for nearly a decade. Mortgage shortfalls, surprise emergencies, Dad's car repairs, the groceries Mom suddenly couldn't afford. Thousands of dollars. Maybe more. And they told you I wasn't helping. She blinked, her arms loosening just slightly. "Are you serious?" I let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Melissa, I was practically their full-time sponsor. And the moment I stopped paying, they showed up at my door demanding answers." She sank onto the couch, looking dazed. "So they were playing us both?" Her voice was quieter now, like she was trying to put the pieces together in real time. I nodded. "They manipulated us. They told you I wasn't helping, so you feel guilty and send money. Meanwhile, they convinced me they were barely scraping by, so I keep covering their expenses. And all this time, they were just living comfortably while we both kept them afloat." Melissa looked physically ill. "I thought I was helping them. I thought you were being selfish, and I was stepping up where you wouldn't." I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache forming. "Yeah, that was the plan." She sat there in stunned silence for a long moment before shaking her head. "This is insane. They made me feel guilty for not doing more, like I was some kind of disappointment, because I wasn't giving enough. Meanwhile, you were bankrolling their whole lifestyle." I leaned back, exhaling. "Now you get it." She let out a bitter chuckle. And here I was, thinking they had it rough. Meanwhile, they were playing golf every other weekend and somehow still convincing me they couldn't afford their electric bill. "Yeah," I muttered. "And remember that Florida trip they took last year? Guess who paid for half of that?" Her eyes widened. "No way. They told me they saved for that." "Melissa, they saved my money. I covered their rent that month, so they wouldn't have to cut back on their vacation plans." She groaned, running her hands through her hair. "I feel like an idiot." "Don't. I did the same thing for years. She looked up at me, still trying to process everything. What do we even do with this? I sighed. I already made my choice. I cut them off. No more money, no more guilt trips. The real question is, what are you going to do? Melissa swallowed hard, her face pale. I need to think. But, Brian, I'm sorry. I really didn't know. And just like that, she was gone. I sat there for a long time after she left, staring at the door, wondering what she'd do next. Would she finally see them for who they really were, or would she let them keep pulling the strings? A few weeks passed in relative silence. For the first time in years, my bank account wasn't bleeding out to cover someone else's expenses. The kids were happy. Kara kept everything running smoothly, and even Melissa had been quieter than usual. I figured she was still processing everything. Then, one evening, my phone rang. It was my dad. I let it go to voicemail. Then my mom called. Then she texted. Then another call. By the fourth attempt, I finally picked up, more out of curiosity than anything else. Brian. My mom's voice was already in full panic mode. We need to talk. It's serious. I rubbed my temple. What is it now? The bank. They sent us a letter. We're behind on our mortgage. They're saying we could lose the house. I paused. Wait. What? We didn't realize how tight things had gotten, she continued, voice trembling just enough to sound dramatic, but not quite genuine. We just need a little help. Just enough to get back on track. I exhaled. Here we go again. Mom, I'm not giving you another cent. Not now, not ever. When I needed you just once, when I was in a hospital bed, terrified, with no one to watch my kids, you refused. You had concert tickets. That was more important than me. So why should I step in now? Because suddenly, things aren't so easy without my bank account keeping you afloat. There was a pause, just a little too long. Then my dad's voice cut in gruff and irritated. Don't talk to your mother like that. We're asking for help, not a lecture. I clenched my jaw. You're not asking. You're expecting. Like you always do. My mom let out a shaky breath. Brian, please. If we lose the house, where will we go? You want us to be homeless? After everything we've done for you? I let out a humorless laugh. I don't know, Mom. Maybe you can cash in those airline miles from all those vacations you took. Or call up one of those friends you were always bragging about having. See if they'll bail you out. Brian. Her voice was sharper now. How can you be so cruel? Cruel? I shook my head. No. What's cruel is spending years manipulating your kids into paying for your lifestyle and then acting like we're the bad guys when we finally say no. You didn't accidentally fall behind on payments. You just never thought you'd actually have to cover them yourselves. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then my dad barked. Fine. You won't help. We get it. But what about Melissa? She still has some sense of family loyalty. I sighed. I wouldn't count on that. And I was right, because 2 days later, Melissa called me. They called me, she said, sounding exhausted. Same story. Mortgage trouble. Begging for money. Guilt trips. And I told them no. I blinked. Really? She let out a shaky laugh. Yeah, you were right. The second I said no, the whole Concerned Parents Act dropped, and suddenly I was the worst daughter in existence. I finally saw it. I nodded, feeling something heavy lift off my chest. So what now? She was quiet for a second. I don't know, but I'm done, and I think you are too. I exhaled. Yeah, I think so. You know what's funny? She added after a beat. For years, I thought they treated you better, that they respected you more. But in the end, they just saw us both as walking wallets. I let out a dry chuckle. Yep, equal opportunity manipulation. She groaned. I still can't believe it took me this long to see it. Hey, at least you saw it before they drained your savings. She sighed. True. For the first time, neither of us was giving in. And for the first time, our parents were on their own. The real question was, what were they going to do now? Cutting my parents off should have felt like losing something. Instead, it felt like gaining everything. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking up to late-night guilt trips or surprise financial emergencies that somehow always needed my money. My stress levels dropped, my sleep improved, and, ironically, so did my career. Maybe it was the mental clarity. Maybe it was just good timing. But a month after cutting my parents off, I got the biggest promotion of my life. Senior software manager. A whole department under my leadership. A raise that made my old salary look like pocket change. I didn't celebrate with some over-the-top party or an expensive trip. Instead, I made the smartest move I could. I invested in stability. First, I found a new home, a place big enough for the kids to grow into, with a backyard, a great school district, and no lingering memories of past mistakes. Second, I hired Michelle full-time. When Kara decided to move to another state, I knew I couldn't juggle work, life, and twins without help. Michelle had already proven herself. And honestly, the kids loved her. And then there was Melissa. Ever since the fallout with our parents, she had been working through her own emotions. We had long, late-night conversations, piecing together all the times they had manipulated us, realizing just how deep it went. But now, without them poisoning our relationship, we were actually getting close. For the first time, it felt like we were siblings, not just two people forced into the same family dynamics. But of course, just as life was settling into something good, the past decided to knock on my door. Or, in this case, blow up my phone. Amber. At first, I ignored the texts, then the calls, then more texts. Finally, she sent a message that made me stop in my tracks. Asterisk, we need to talk about the kids. I miss them. Asterisk. Miss them? The same kids she hadn't contacted in years? I knew exactly what this was about. Word had gotten out, probably through mutual acquaintances, that I wasn't just scraping by anymore. I had money, stability, and now, suddenly, she wanted to play the concerned mother card. I agreed to meet, mostly out of curiosity. We met at a neutral location, an outdoor cafe. She arrived dressed like she was trying to impress someone, all polished and put together. But the act was easy to see through. The moment she saw me, her face lit up with that fake warmth I remembered all too well. "Brian, it's been so long." I nodded, letting her talk first. She rambled about how she had grown and how she had made mistakes, but wanted a second chance with Lucas and Macy. Then she dropped the real reason she was here. "I think we should talk about me having more time with the kids. Maybe even shared custody." I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I pulled out my phone, opened an email, and slid across the table. "That's the court decision," I said. "You lost parental rights when you abandoned them. That's not changing." Her smile wavered. "But, that was years ago. People change." I leaned back. "Do they? Because I don't see a mother who wants her kids back. I see someone who realizes their ex is successful now and wants a piece of it." Her jaw tightened. "That's not fair." Neither was leaving me with two toddlers and draining our savings before skipping town. She had nothing to say to that. The final blow? When the kids arrived with Michelle to pick me up, the moment they saw Amber, they didn't run to her. They didn't even acknowledge her. Instead, they ran straight to me, hiding behind my legs like she was a stranger. Because to them, she was... Amber's face fell. "Macy, Lucas, it's me." "Mommy." Lucas shook his head. "You're not my mommy." And that was that. She left in a huff, throwing out some last-minute line about how I was poisoning them against her. But the truth was simple. She had poisoned her own relationship with them the moment she walked away. As for me, I moved forward. The new house became a home. My career flourished. Melissa and I built a real sibling bond. And for the first time, I surrounded myself with people who actually cared about me. Not for what I could give them, but for who I was. Then, months later, the final test came. A knock on my door. I opened it, and there they were. My parents. They looked different. More worn down. The confident arrogance was gone, replaced with something that almost looked like regret. "Brian," my mom started. We wanted to talk." I let them stand there, waiting. "We made mistakes," she continued. We see that now. We just want to make things right. I studied them, wondering if this was real or just another last-ditch attempt to claw their way back into comfort. Then my dad spoke. We're your family. Doesn't that still mean something? I exhaled, feeling something I hadn't expected. Nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just indifference. Family? I said, you had a family. You just didn't appreciate until you lost it. They didn't have an answer to that. I didn't invite them in, because some doors, once closed, should stay that way.